Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be continuing on with our application. If you like this video series, please press the like button so that other people can find it as well. Maybe it helps somebody out. So today in this video we will try to make this hello title more interactive. So the point of this hello and then the space here is so that the user can actually type in their name and it gets saved for them. So if we go to our React app right now, this is just a text, this is the h1 tag, and it's just a list of underscores here. But we need to make this into an input and also make it more dynamic. So if we go to our home component, we can see that the title, which is this component here, just takes in a username, and it's actually just hard-coded right now. So let's try to make that dynamic. So what we'll do is make a constant variable called username, and set username, and you can see where this is going. We'll be using the useState hook, which comes from React, and to begin with, the default value will be empty, and here we can update this now to username. So what we're doing here is creating a state variable with a default value of an empty string, and it gets set to the username property, and then the set username is a method returned by useState, which we can use to actually set the name. And one important thing here we want to do is always type our variables so that it can be clear. And if we save that, we can now move on to the title component. So if we go ahead and open the title, as you can see, it's just a empty underscores here. But what we can do is actually add an input box, and the type will be text. If you notice, both of these components are lowercase, so this means this is an actual DOM input, so it is regular HTML instead of a React component. Since now we're taking the username property, what we'll do is the value will always equal username, and if we want to update the username, we just have to update the username state variable in the parent component here. This should actually be props.username. Okay, as far as it's concerned, we should see a change where we have an input box, but it doesn't quite look the same anymore. So there's probably a few styles we need to apply so that it can look proper as far as our design goes. So for now, we'll add a class name, and then we'll open the title CSS file. And this is one of the features where we actually can nest inside of the CSS. So as you can see, title has a input called with the class name of input username. So we can add the same nesting feature here. And the important thing is the background needs to be transparent. So now we have a transparent background, but it looks a little odd. So if we actually go ahead and hover, click on this arrow and then select the input box, we can see that the background is transparent. That's good, but the browser actually adds quite a few styles here. What we are seeing here is this border. So the border style is inset, and it's a 2-pixel inset. So what we should actually do is make border none, and that should fix our problem. But as you can see now, there's a problem where it's not even visible anymore. So after setting the border none, we can do a border bottom of 2-pixel solid and white. So that'll kind of simulate our underscore. So as you can see, we still have an input box, but it just has an underscore under it, which is a border. So now that we have that, it's a little weird, looking a little weird because it's right under the h1 tag. So what we should do is we can use something called flexbox. So the title will make it display flex. And the default way flex works is it puts the elements right next to each other. So the default view is flex direction row. So row means that everything goes in the same row. So that looks a little better. Now everything is in the same row, but as you can see, it's off to the left here, which is not what we want. So we can fix that by adding justify content center. So what that means is everything that is inside of title should be in the center. So what's inside of title is an h1 and the input. So both of those will be in the center now. So that looks pretty good. Now we can't actually edit anything here. So to edit that, we need to actually update the username. So let's try to add that. Now React has some events that we can use. One is called onChange, and this will take a function which will get an event. So let's create that function here. We can just name it handle onChange or handle on username change, which will take an event, and this will be an arrow function. So to get a better idea, since we know the value is inside of event.target.value, we'll just add that here, and so that we can see the updated changes. So as I type in more letters, we can see they're being printed out here. So what we need to actually do is not console log it, but we need to call the function in the parent component. So this set username, we don't have access to it here, so we actually need access. So we'll add the prop here, and it'll take a string and just return void. So here we can do props.setUsername, and we'll just pass it the value, the new value. And inside of here, it's complaining that we don't have a property set username set here, so we can do set username as a prop. So now if we type in something, it actually saves it. So what's happening is when this input updates on change, we call this function, which then calls the prop. And since this prop is setting the value inside of the state, it's always saved even though the function re-renders. So that sounds great. It's all working, but it doesn't actually look how it's supposed to look, right? So there's a few things we need to do. Is input needs to actually follow the styling of the h1 tag. This should actually extend the h1 tag. So the way we can do that is if we go back to our base file. So the base has our h1, right? So instead of copying this and pasting it back into the input, we should actually make use of the features that Sass offers us. So remember, we can import files. So what we can do is find the base file here. So we should go 2 levels up and then go to the SCSS folder and then base. And then what we can do is actually extend it. So we can make use of this extend function, extend h1. And now it looks exactly like h1. Okay, so that looks pretty good, and if I type in my name, it actually sticks. But we have some padding issue here, so the way we can either resolve that is with some padding or with some margins. So if we take a look here and maybe just try to see in the browser what looks good for us, we can add a margin. Let's just try margin left. So that'll give you a spacing between the two elements here. Or if we change it to padding, it will not create spacing in between the two elements, but it'll just add some padding inside of the input box. So in my opinion, the margin looks a lot better. So let's open this here and then add the margin. And let's refresh. Okay, so that looks pretty good. But as you notice, when I refresh, it all goes away. So how can we actually fix that? Well, there's a few different ways. Usually what you would want to do is when somebody logs in or saves their name, there's a database in your backend where you would save that name. So maybe call an API to save the name, and then next time the person loads the page or loads your app, you get the name again from the server, from the database. But since this is a little bit out of scope for this project, what we can do is use some browser storage options, so we don't have to actually create an entire server and database. We can go over that in the next series, but for this series we can just use some local storage options that we have here in the browser. So if you open the application tab, go to local storage, as you can see, the browser does give you some ways to add key and value pairs. So if we do something like username here, and then the value will be whatever the user types in, that would be one way of doing that. So let's try and set that up in our home component. So we have the state here, but we can actually use another hook called useEffect. which will take in a function, an arrow function, and the second argument will be an array which tells the useEffect when to run this. So we only really want it to run when the username updates. So for example, if we put in username here, whenever the username updates, this function will run. So it's an effect of the username. So what we should actually do here is save the username to a local storage. So it'll be in two places. One is the state, which our application can read, and the other is local storage, which will be in the browser. So there's an API for local storage called LocalStorage, and we can actually have a few methods here. We can set an item, so this will take the key. So our key will just be username. And usually if you want to write keys like this, which will never change, we should make a configuration item. So remember, we had made a lot of folders here. We should actually make another folder called config. And let's make a new file inside of this, config variables, maybe called variables. And this doesn't have to be a React component. We can just export some constants. So the username key will be username. And in this component, we can use that username key. So we set the item with the key of username key, and the value will be username. So whatever the user has typed in. And let's try that out. So we have a username, it's set to empty now. And if I type in my name, it updates as we type. So if I refresh now, we still have nothing. So why did that happen and everything just got cleared? Well, when the application actually loads, we are setting this to a default value of empty. So that's basically updating every time we refresh. So instead of doing that, we should actually get the value here, right? So if we get the value, for example, from local storage, we saw there was a method to get. So we have a get item, and this we want to use the same key. So let's use username. And instead of making the default value empty, we should just make it whatever the local storage has. Now, this is supposed to be a string, but what local storage actually stores for you, it could be an object or null. So it could be null. So what we should do is when we get the item, if it exists, then we use the item. Otherwise, we just set it to empty string, right? So if this returns null, then we can use the empty string. So in here, instead of having the default value as empty string, we should just get it from local storage, which could be empty, but it could also have some property already saved from a previous session. So now let's type in our name. So we still see the username being set in the local storage, but if I refresh now, we still have the username and it's being displayed here. So this is one way of making your application interactive, and now in the next video, what we can do is actually start working on this search component here. So please subscribe for that if you want to keep up. And if you missed the last few videos, please check them out. Thanks a lot for watching.